Hi, I'm Stuart Pockington.
I'm Alan Furstenberg, and this is Two Voice Devs. So, hello, everyone. As you might notice, we again have another guest host this week. We had a lot of questions that have been coming up recently about APL, so we sought out an APL expert, and Stuart here volunteered. So, Stuart, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into voice?
Yeah, sure. So I'm based in the UK, in sunny Nottingham, and I got into voice development probably about, it's getting close to 4 years ago now. So, and I started off by getting a Echo Dot for, I think I got it for Christmas a few years back, and I was really interested in the technology because I'm into my gadgets and my tech. And within the first month of getting it, I've spent a small fortune on the smart home house with bulbs and speakers and everything. And then I just got curious about how does this work. And when I found out that actually, third parties can create their own skills for it, I thought, okay, I want to give that a go. And I set myself a target by, I think within a certain number of months, I wanted to have developed and released my own skill and put it out there. Initially I used Storyline. I don't know if you can remember Storyline, Alan.
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's a bit like VoiceFlow before VoiceFlow.
Okay.
It was a no-code setup. It was really easy to and quick to develop voice skills through that. I put a skill together. It was a really simple quiz. I think it was based on Formula One. Just
everyone does a quiz first, right? That's like everyone's first. Yeah.
So I did a quiz. I got it out there, and then from there it's like, okay, what can I do next? And I've done a few skills. I entered a dev post competition. It was the Alexa Tech for Good. I come runner up with a skill called EV Assistant, and that was just a skill that would allow EV drivers to find the nearest charging point just by asking by the name of a location. So I got run up with that, and then not long after that, I entered the Dev Post Alexa multimodal competition using APL, and I developed a skill called Loop It, which won. So, and then from there, that gave me a bit of confidence around what I was doing, and I set up my own little business called Soapbox. And I've just been developing voice skills since then, and I've gone on to do Google and Bixby as well since then also.
Okay, so again, we saw you listed a lot on APL.ninja. Why don't you tell us a little bit about APL.ninja and your involvement there, and what APL.ninja is?
Yeah, wow. So APL.ninja, first of all, if anyone hasn't tried it out and they're interested in APL, go check it out straight away. It's amazing. So it's developed by Alexander Martin, who knows absolutely everything there is to know about APL. And APL.ninja is a site where you can go and see other people's templates. So I've shared some of mine on there. There's lots from other people in the voice community that develop APL also. You can go and see how other people have pulled their APL documents together. You can copy one of their templates and then you can tweak it and make something unique for yourself through it as well. And it's just a really nice tool to get into APL for basic right through to advanced features.
So it's a great way to kind of learn, the old days in the web when we would, load a page and then look at the HTML and see how it worked. It gives you that kind of ability.
Yes, absolutely. So you might see something like, how did someone do that? You can go straight into the code and see exactly what they did and how they made things work. So, and you can copy it and put it straight into your own Alexa skill as well.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So as this kind of suggests, I had a lot of APL questions. I am just getting started on the Alexa side of the world. I come from the Google perspective. And in diving into APL, I suddenly realized I had a ton of questions. So I think there's going to be a lot of me asking you questions, if that's okay. APL, as I understand, is the Alexa presentation language, and it's kind of a templating language. Do I describe that right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to describe it. So it's just JSON. So you
Okay.
use JSON to describe the layout of the APL document, so how things are going to appear on the Alexa Echo screens.
Okay. How do we, I guess, send that back? So how do we indicate that APL, this APL document, this APL JSON structure, it needs to be part of the response?
Yeah, okay. So within your lambda code, your backend, you can call APL render directive, and that then tells the skill that APL should be loaded up on screen. But also you need to check whether the device the user is on has a screen before you call it as well.
What happens if you send back the APL render document directive and it doesn't support APL?
Yeah, you'll get an error message. If you do that. I'm not sure which one, whether it's there was an error with the requested skill response or one of the other ones you get back from Alexa. But yeah, you need to check whether they've got the device and handle it differently based on what device.
And are we handing, as part of the directive, are we handing a URL to a document or the JSON structure itself, or what are we sending back?
Yeah, so you're passing in within the directive, you're passing in the file path to the JSON document. So you can have it hosted something like an S3 bucket and pass that through to the directive. Or when I code it, it's just in a folder within my backend code. So I'll just pass it in from there.
Oh, so you're just passing back the JSON itself?
Yes, it's just a JSON.
Okay.
Pass through.
Okay.
So you can pass data through as well if you want to.
Right. We'll get to data in a second because I started wrapping my head around this part finally. So when we're dealing with these templates, what kind of is the model that you've got a different template for each response and you'll send back a different one depending on what your response is? Or is there a single mega document template that you send back once and you say flip to this screen or flip to this other screen? Again, I think of this in terms of how both Google does it and how the web does it, where nowadays we're moving to this single web page model, and you load that single web page and then you say show these components, show that component, but it's all still one page.
Yeah. So I suppose it depends on how you're using your intent and your APL design. So you could have one APL template that you use throughout the entire skill, which might be fine, but you'll be limited in terms of what the user can see, and it'll feel a bit repetitive. But what you can do for every intent handler, you can pass through a different APL template through to it.
So the normal routine is, you just pass back the template that makes the most sense at that time.
Yeah, and if you've got two intents where you can reuse the same APL template, you might just want to update the existing APL document rather than render a brand new one. So you can do that as well. So you've got the choice. You can update an existing APL document loaded in memory or render a brand new document.
Got it. Okay. What's the performance like when rendering? How quickly does it tend to render things?
Okay, so a lot of that is down to how you develop the APL.
Okay.
And especially if you're going to throw a lot of images in. So one of the first skills I put out there called Santa's Little Helper, I had some really large PNG files that I was loading in, and it take a good 10 seconds to load an image in.
Oh, wow.
So I quickly got onto, tinypng.com, shrunk the files down and solved that issue. So you need to be conscious of what you're going to put onto the screen and try and optimize it as much as you can, like you would for
like you would for the web, yeah. So when you specify images, again, are those images, are they just image URLs and it loads it from an S3 bucket or wherever? Or do you need to specify that in some other format?
So if you're using PNGs.
Yeah, for something like PNG.
Yeah, you just reference the URL.
Okay.
You can also use AVG images.
Oh, right. Okay. So AVG is the vector graphics for APL, right?
Yeah, it's the SVG for APL.
Okay. Now, do those get specified in the document, or are those again loaded from a separate? How do those get loaded?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I struggle with SVG. It's a concept which is fairly new to me. So I've never really done anything with SVG files. So AVG for me, again, it's like a new concept, and I struggle with the idea of how it all works. But basically, you put the information describing the AVG image into the document itself.
Okay.
And then it gets rendered on screen. How? I don't know. How it works, but,
rendering is complicated on no matter the platform. Okay. So maybe I need to take a step back. We're talking about these documents kind of broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And from my reading, I kind of get that there are these pieces in a document, and maybe we can walk through those. So what is a component?
Okay, so there's many different components.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, text, you could have a component just to display text. You can have a component to display an image, a button.
Okay.
Wrappers.
So components are our widgets.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Exactly, yeah. So you'd have like things like containers and frames just to help you position the content.
Okay.
Within the APL document.
Okay, that actually leads to the next question I had is how do we specify the layout of these things then?
Because when I do it, I've got a kind of I'll create a container, I'll check what the screen size is, and then I'll put the components in where I want them and then align them as I want them.
Okay. One of the other things I read about is that there's also styling. And that's separate from these, and again, when I think of that, I think of on the website, we've got HTML and then we've got CSS to do that styling. Is there an equivalent Alexa style sheet, or how is that done?
Yeah, so within the APL document, you've got a styles property.
Okay.
That you can go in and you can add custom styles. So it might be like header text, and you define that as being red, and the font size is 18. Etc. And then once you've defined that within the styles element, you can then refer to that throughout the rest of the APL document. So it saves you having to say if you've got a different design for the different screen types. So you've got the Echo 10, you've got the Echo Show Gen 1, Echo Show Gen 2, the Echo Show 8 and 5, and Spot. So if you've got a different design layout for each of them, rather than specifying for each screen that you want the header text to be red and this size font, you can do it all within the styles and then reference it.
Okay. And that sounds like something else that I read, what was being referred to as a resource. So these are, again, just named things that you can put in one place and reference those from elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So you can pull in there. You can add as many resources as you want within the APL document.
Okay. So you mentioned the different display types. Do you do all of the different display types in a single document, and how do you specify the different platforms that it'll run on in those cases?
Yeah. Okay.
Or that it will display on. Sorry.
Okay. So I've seen this done a few different ways, and if you go on APL Ninja, that's a great place again to look at and see how people handle it. People do it slightly differently. So when I first started developing APL, I'd develop a different screen layout for every single device that was available to do APL on. But I've changed the way I approach it now. So now I'll do one design for rectangular devices, and then I'll do one reluctantly for the Echo Spot because it feels the Echo Spot is, I've got one in my bedroom, and I do like it, but I don't like developing APL for it just because it's round and it's awkward.
Dealing with shapes like that are tough. So
Yeah.
the ones that you deal for the rectangle, do you then just change the spacing and the styling for each one?
Yeah, absolutely. So
you reference a different style based on the. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So for example, the Echo Show 5, which is the ratio is different to the other rectangular devices. What I might do is just tweak the positioning of certain components on the screen to suit.
Okay. Now, one of the things I read says, and then we've got a package which bundles this all together in multiple documents. And that's where I got lost again. So is there, can you specify style in one place and then reference it from multiple documents? Is that how it works, or do you know, or is that more complicated than it tends to be worth?
It is more complicated, but yeah, it depends on the use case. So you can split up an APL document, and people normally only do this to get around the file size limitation. So don't quote me on this, but I think there's a 24 kilobyte limit on the.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, yeah, on the file. So I've run into this before, where my document size went over that, and it just refused to render.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So you can split up your APL document into 2 parts. So you can have the kind of meaty, chunky part of it hosted on a S3 bucket, and you just pull that into the APL document after it. Well, I suppose it's as it's rendered, it's pulled in, but it doesn't count towards the file size limit, so you can avoid hitting that limit in there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And so as part of the directive, you would then say that you're loading in more than one document? You can specify multiple documents to load in, or?
Yeah, so in the directive, you're still pulling in one document.
Okay.
But within that APL document that you told the directive about is a reference to the other half of the document.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it can reference other documents that have the other components. So you could create, for example, a document that has the style, and then in your other documents, you'd load in that style portion document. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
That makes a couple of things make a lot more sense. Good. Okay.
More effort, but it might be worth it depending on what you're doing. But then I suppose if you've got multiple different APL documents in the same skill, or whether you're reusing it in other skills, then it might be worth going to that effort to do it.
Got it. Okay. Things are starting to gel. Starting to. Okay. So let's flip to the other side of this and say you can also, in addition to the template, you can also send back data. Or sorry, in addition to the document, you also send back data. And when I saw that, it finally kind of clicked in my head that the document was a template, because in that template, we're going to be referencing just like a variable data that we've stuck in this data. And that data is, I mean, it's just a set of name value pairs, basically.
Yep, absolutely. So you pass that through binary data source in the APL render directive. And within there, you can put whatever data you want, you pass that through into the APL document. And an example of using that would be if you want to display a score, which changes over time. You can just pass through the score through the data source, and the APL document will render whatever that score might be at the point in time when it's rendered.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's that makes, I mean, that's essentially what makes the page dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of dynamic, one of the things you mentioned, one of the components you said was a button.
Yes.
How does that work? So if I press a button, what happens?
When you press a button, so I tend to use a custom image with a touch wrapper wrapped around it. So when a user pushes a button, it sends an event back to the skill, the skill backend.
Okay.
And then detect and then handle like you would if it was a touch with voice, as people like to say. So you can handle touch events like you can a voice event as well.
Okay, and that generates an Alexa event.
Yeah, so that's one example. You can also use buttons on screen to actually update something within the APL document without calling another intent handler. So you can update things on screen dynamically using buttons as well.
Okay, so let me address the first one first, because that one I have my head wrapped around. That's a regular Alexa event. That's something that Mark and I covered last week. Okay. So I almost understand those. That's straightforward handling. So and that's the rough equivalent on the Google side of sending a what we call the send text query function call. How do you do something in APL itself?
Okay, so it could be a button that just triggers a command. So you could have commands set up within your APL document that you fire off a button touch.
What's a command? Hang on.
Okay, so the way I like to think of it is a command is just a set of instructions that tell a component within the APL document what to do at any given time. So I use it a lot for animations within an APL document, and I'll normally just do that as soon as the document is rendered. I'll have a sequence of commands that I trigger, which can do things like make an image rotate or move around the screen, or you can use it to, like, say, wait 5 seconds and then update the text. So instead of saying A, it will now say B, things like that.
Okay. Are these commands JavaScript? What are they? Yeah,
so it's definitely not JavaScript.
Okay.
APL specific. So it's there's a lot of documentation. You can go out and you can see how the commands work. And again, there's lots of examples on APL.ninja where you can go commands and how they're set up. Yeah, it's an Alexa thing. It's an Alexa APL specific.
Okay. And I guess this is related to another question that I sort of had, and that is, and I think I read this, but I kind of got lost. Can you do, and I guess we kind of suggested this when we talked about device types before, is there a way to kind of do conditionals to say, if I've got a large screen, I want to show 5 buttons across, but I've got a smaller screen, I only want to do 2 buttons across. So is there conditionals of some sort?
Yes. So the equivalent to that in the APL is the when statement. So when this value equals to this, show this component.
And this is a property we attach on each component?
Yeah, so for each component, you can, it's optional, you don't have to have it. If you don't have it, it will display. If you put the when conditional on the component, it will only show when that condition has been met.
And of course, we can tie that to the data that we get sent back. So if we want, if we have only sent back one template and we want to vary it, whether you answered the question correctly or incorrectly, we can use the same template, send back a Boolean flag to say correct or not, and show, the green check mark or the big ragged X. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's a good example. So you'd load in the APL document into the device memory. It's a quiz, like in your example, to get a question right, and then you update that document that's in memory and say, set this value to true. And then, you can fire off some animations or have another image pop in based on.
So, and I guess, are these event driven? So if I have triggered a button to update commands, which is still kind of blowing my mind here, I'm still not wrapping my head around that part yet. Can one of the things that it updates is a value and have the when conditional on that value? So when you press the button, it updates the value, the when fires correctly?
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good question. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stump you.
so you can update things within the APL document, like I've touched on before. Whether you could target one of the conditionals on there without another intent handler, I'm not sure.
Fair enough. And like I said, I think of that mostly because coming from, you know, the HTML DOM world these days, that is how we tend to do things. We hook things up and say, you know, especially with something like React, we're hooking things up to say, you know, show this widget when this variable is set to true. And somewhere in your event code, you're going to set that variable to true or set that state to true. And things just magically change. So I'm curious if that's, so that was where the question came from.
Yeah, no, and I think the answer is yes, you can do that. It's just I've never used it like that before, so
okay.
I feel like I need to sit on the fence a little bit with that answer, but
no, you know, like as you said, APL is complicated, and if it's not something you tend to do, you know, maybe that means it's not something you should do, you know, we should be doing. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think as well, a lot of people describe themselves as Alexa developers, but I think there is such a thing as an APL developer as well. I don't think it's one and the same thing always.
Interesting. Okay. So one of the things I ran into while researching was, and kind of one of the things that clicked was, yeah, we can send this data down, and this data can be in the form of, you know, it's basically a JSON object. You know, it's a JavaScript data structure, which means it includes arrays. One of the things I couldn't figure out is if there's a way to loop over that array and display one component for each element in the array.
Yes, there is. So,
cool. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about APL is I've been developing in it for a while now, but there's still things that I've not tried out yet. But just recently, I did what you just described. So I used a sequence to basically display different avatars on the screen, which is just in one great big list of data sources. And for each one, it will return the image on screen. But I only have to reference it once within the APL, and it just works out and does the rest.
And that's called a sequence.
Yeah. That's,
okay. I get so it sounds like what you're saying is you specify that this is a sequence and you want this widget you want this container sorry, let's try that again. You want this component applied to every element of the sequence?
Yes, spot on.
Oh, great. So okay, I love that, because that makes it really easy to do things like high score tables, and you know, where you are listing the person's avatar and a rank number and their name and their score type thing, and that's done with a sequence. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it had to be done, and I'm like, I just couldn't find it, and I can't wrap my head around it, and I'm like, and there's no JavaScript here, which is what I'm thinking I want to do, but okay.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you said that, because you can also use JSX within APL as well, which is, it might be more familiar to people that develop React sites.
Yeah. Okay. So
JSX to do things.
So
like
tell us that was recently announced, wasn't it? The JSX to APL converter. Have you played with it any?
No. So so again, it's one of them things I've looked at, and it does look really good. And it, you know, it's useful for people that have got that kind of background at working on React applications. I suppose when they come to do something in APL, it would just feel a lot more familiar to them. But as of yet, I've not played with it myself.
Okay. I think I'm beginning to get a broad handle on this. A couple of things. What other kinds of widgets and containers are available? So we talked about buttons, we talked about touch wrappers. What are there things like drop-down menus, for example, so you can touch it and see a list of stuff?
Yes, so there's drop downs. You got different kinds of buttons. So there's Alexa buttons specifically, which you can use within an APL document. You can bring in lazy loading lists within there as well.
Okay, so tell me about these lazy loading lists.
Okay, so again, this is another component or feature of APL that I've not touched on myself, just because I've not had the need to. But essentially, and it kind of links in with what we've just spoken about. So say you've got a list of 100 items. You might display 10 items at a time on screen. And then when the document renders, rather than calling in all 100 items in that data list, it will only call in, so it will call in items 1 to 10. And then when you start to scroll on the screen, it will only call in additional items when it needs to. So when you start to scroll up, it might call items 11 to 20.
Okay, so.
And so on and so on.
So so in the data that we send down initially, we send down just the 10?
You send all of it. So
okay.
But it will only render on screen when it needs to. So
okay.
that will have render time on your device.
Got it. So it's render time, not transmission time. So, so this isn't a way to say, you're only sending down 10 because that's how you can get your data out of your database the quickest. And when it gets to the list, it triggers an event to get another 10. Yeah.
So when you passing through the data, you would have already got that data out of your database already. Okay. So it's all there ready to pass through. And it's just a case of, it will render 10 at a time. And you can change those values. So you could say display 3 at a time, for example. And I think the recommendation is you pass, it will display 3 times more than what you need. So if you can see 5 items on screen, it will render 15 items. So you've got a bit of time while you're scrolling, and then it will start
rendering the next batch.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Any other interesting widgets or containers that are available? Keyboards.
There's so much in APL. So you got things like pages. So and I don't know if you've seen a skill that uses a pager. So you might have a lot of information about different things you want to get on screen at once. Rather than try to squeeze that into just one screen, you can set it up so you can swipe left and right to find out information about specific devices. I've seen APL which uses like a karaoke effect, so it highlights text at a certain time.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because that was something I saw reference to, and it very much surprised me because that's something that we have on the assistant side that uses SSML's mark tag. And I know that's not something that's available on the Alexa side. So how is that karaoke effect done and synchronizing it with the audio?
Yeah. So, okay. So when you say audio, so let's say you was playing a song on Alexa with lyrics in it, and you wanted it to follow that. You synchronize those two. Okay. Effectively, what you'd have is a text component, and say you've got 100 words in there. And effectively, the way you set it up, it will just highlight the text as it's speaking it, and you use a transformer within the APL document to do text to speech. So rather than the speech coming from your lambda function or your backend code, it's coming from within the APL document.
Whoa. Okay, hang on. So there is a text to speech component in APL.
Yeah.
Okay, that threw me. I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And there is one in APL as well. So you can do it in either APL or APL. But yeah, you have to use transformers for that. And again, I think there's not many times when you might want to do it, or however, there are some advantages of doing that. So a good example is you've got something on screen where you want the user to scroll. So as soon as you touch the screen, whatever Alexa is doing, she'll stop as soon as you touch the screen. Unless you use a text-to-speech transformer to speak the text within the APL document, you can use that, and it is a bit of a hack. So when the user starts to scroll, it doesn't interrupt what Alexa is doing.
Okay, so it sounds like as part of, I mean, my take on this is increasingly Amazon's going to be pushing APL as, again, as the template language and not doing the text-to-speech part from the server, but instead leaving it totally rendered by the client device.
Yeah. So yeah, render it on the client. So I haven't thought of it like that before, but yeah, you're right.
Interesting. That's totally blown my mind. I guess the related question is, how do you do video in APL?
Okay, so yeah, so again, so with Alexa, there's two ways of handling video. So you can use the video player directive, or you can render it within APL itself, which has got its benefits, its pros and cons, versus doing it in a video player.
So what are the pros and cons? Yeah.
Okay, so when you're using the video player directive, when that video plays, effectively, your session within that skill has ended.
Okay, so it's the same as the audio player. You lose control. You're out of session at that point.
Exactly, but within APL you haven't. So, but the downside is things like having a button to play and pause is down on you as the developer to handle.
Okay, so you need to render your own skinning, which is what everyone wants to do anyway.
Yeah. You just gave me a great memory of back in the day using Winamp and all the different skins you could.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a video component inside APL.
Yes. So you can render the video, a variety of different formats within APL. You can size it however you want. You can put your own custom buttons on for play and pause, and you remain in session, which is great for many use cases. Just a little bit extra development on there. And I know the certification team are maybe a bit picky around some of the things doing that as well. But yeah, absolutely, you can do it within the APL document as well. And you can you can use a video as a background as well. So if you want a really cool background, you can have a video on. You just have to do the text to speech transformer as well, which will because if you don't, you can't have Alexa speaking whilst the video in the background is playing. If that makes sense.
This text to speech transformer is really blowing my mind here. Okay, I think that's almost. Oh no, I guess. So two final things. One is, recently they released the Echo Show 10, what I like to call the dancing Echo, which, and I kind of found out there are extensions called choreography extensions. What are extensions?
Yeah, so there's 3 extensions available at the moment. So there's Smart Motion API, the Entity Sensing API, and something called a Backstack API, which you can use as extensions within APL. So, so Smart Motion that involves or includes things like turn to user. So when I invoke a skill and Alexa wakes up, it will detect where I am and it will turn the screen to face me.
Okay.
Things like follow user, and you can have some scripted choreos. Is that right? How you pronounce it, choreo?
I assume it's short for choreography, so I think it's choreo. Yeah.
Okay. So you can, I think there's 5 or 6 different defined choreo, so it might be just to shake the screen. So a nice example of that might be, if, again, thinking of a quiz, someone gets the right answer, you just shake the screen to make it look like the device is delighted with that you've got it right, type of thing. The sensing API, and this one is really cool. So there's something in it where you can say effectively work. So say if you've got 2 people stood in front of the Alexa device, it can work out which one of those 2 people are the most engaged, and then you can use that information and turn to that user rather than the second one. I find that really fascinating, and I've not got what the new Echo show, the Dancing Echo, myself yet, but I can't wait to get one and play around with that, because just the sound of that sounds fascinating. How does it know who's the most engaged person?
Yeah. So these extensions sound like they come from Amazon. Mm-hmm. Are there extensions that come from others? Can anybody write an extension?
So, to the best of my knowledge, no.
Okay.
However, reading through the documentation around it, it kind of makes me think they've hinted that they might open it up if it's not already, and I've just missed it. But yeah, I think there's the possibility.
Okay. So, okay.
And I could be wrong on that. It's just, to the best of my knowledge, there's only the Alexa defined ones in them.
Okay. So I guess my final question is, all of this is amazing, and I know that you can test it using the simulator. Mm-hmm. What happens when you actually deploy it and there are errors? Is there a way to do debugging? Is there a way to do logging?
No, not really, no. So
okay.
the best way, and the advice I give everyone, is test it within the developer console, the test simulator, but always test it on a real device as well. Because the test simulator, even when everything looks absolutely perfect within that, when you render it on a real device, it can look different to what you was expecting. And it could be something simple like you've got text, and let's say you've got it in the top right-hand corner of the screen. In the test simulator, it looks great, but on a real device, you might just have gone out of screen by 2 or 3 pixels, for example, and the certification team will spot that and fail it, and that's why, and that can be really frustrating for something like that. So always test it on a real device if you can. Okay, so I think that is all of my questions. Thank you so much for coming and talking about this. And I guess I'll toss out, for anybody who has questions about APL, feel free to reach out to Mark and I as always, but I think better would be to reach out to the folks at APL Ninja and you. What's the best way that people can find you? Yeah, so the best way is to find me on Twitter. I'm voice_dev_UK. Yeah, and if you follow me and send me a message on there, I'll look out for any messages that come through and get back to you as soon as I can. So fantastic. I get to start playing with this a bit. I am sure that I will be reaching out to you, and I'm equally sure, as APL changes over time, we'll probably have you back again in the future. So yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. No, thanks for having me, and I'd love to come back sometime. So we look forward to everyone else's questions and to your return on some future episode of Two Voice Devs. Take care, everyone. Have a good week.